Life is busier than ever. I'm sure that's true for many of you, not just me. I mean, sure, I love to sink 40 plus hours into an amazing hero's quest from time to time, Final Fantasy XVI being the latest example of this. I'll say it, I heart Clive. But again, the opportunity to do so is few and far between. On top of this, it feels like media in general is in the midst of a time sink spree. Think about the bloat of movie runtimes and the overpopulation of TV shows saturating a dizzying number of streaming services. I mean, this shit is overload. I say all that to say that I've grown to love and seek out experiences where the creators seem to value my time. And I'd like to spotlight one of those games today. So, here's our review of Thronefall. If you take a glance at their Steam page, the developers Grizzly Games describe Thronefall as simply a, quote, minimalist game about building and defending your little kingdom. I mean, even the description is succinct, it's so great. If I can add some color to this description, it's essentially an amalgamation of a city builder meets tower defense game. You control a little king where you can spend gold to build up your empire. There are essentially two types of buildings: economy buildings that grant you gold, and defense buildings like towers and barracks that provide soldiers to bolster your army and defenses. The trick is to find and strike the right balance between economy and defense buildings so that you're able to constantly improve your defenses and economy and weather the oncoming hordes that seek to destroy everything you've built. Speaking of hordes, this is where the tower defense aspects of the game come into play. See, during the day, you have the opportunity to build your little kingdom, but there is only so much you can do. To progress through the game and earn any coins you have coming your way, you must advance to night, and this is where enemy hordes appear to try to make a run at you. Your little king fights to defend your kingdom by utilizing different types of attacks based on your weapon choice. Think of it like Vampire Survivors a bit. This, combined with the defenses you've built during the day, will either work to successfully thwart the enemy horde's advances, or will break and allow the enemy to destroy your castle, resulting in an epic failure. For every successful defense you have, you'll be rewarded gold, but on every subsequent night, the enemy grows stronger and larger. Hopefully you have a good grasp of what this game is. I would say, think of examples of like Thayar Billions, Dwarf Fortress, even like that one student indie game, Vedilum. I mean, it kind of gets around that. But I haven't gone into much detail about why I love this game as much as I do. So I'll give you two positives about this, and one maybe not so positive depending on your perspective. So let's jump into the first positive, which should be obvious: gameplay and how it ties into player time investment. Each game, or run if you want to think about it that way, lasts between 20 to 30 minutes. Before each game, you can pick your weapons, perks, and possible debuffs. Why would you add debuffs? Well, at the end of each run, you'll be rewarded a certain amount of points based on how well you performed and the difficulty you selected. These points enable you to unlock more weapons and perks that may fit your style of play. Again, adding debuffs ups the challenge considerably, but it also rewards you with additional points at the end of your run. This setup encourages the one more run feeling invoked by many great roguelikes, or the one more turn feeling for those Civ sycophants out there. And this is meant as no slight, I am one of them. For myself, even after beating a level and unlocking the next, I found myself more times than not going back to the previous level and trying a different mix of perks and debuffs to see if I could top my high score and possibly earn myself some bragging rights to share on Reddit and Steam forums. I knew that one more run wouldn't require a heavy time investment, and the fun and glory I could gain from a flawless run was well worth the price. The next positive for me is the art style. Now, I could be in a kind of minimalist phase, I guess, at the moment, but I do dig the minimalist yet brighter art style of Thronefall. They could have easily gone the route of making something that felt more atmospheric and desperate. For instance, something like Inside comes to mind. But they went the opposite direction, and I think it works better for it. Also, just to add further context about the art style, Grizzly Games is well versed in minimalist art. Their previous releases, the city builder Islanders and the wingsuit action game Superflight, also utilize a minimalist art style, and both titles, they totally nail it. Real briefly, I want to touch on the music, actually. Now, I know I said two main positive, but I'll add the third because, well, it's my review and that's what I want to talk about. Simply stated, the music is kick-ass. I'm not completely sure of the influence, but if I had to make a guess, I would say the game's soundtrack draws heavily from Celtic music. I mean, it works beautifully. I can and have listened to it for hours. My favorite track is A New Rain, which is the soundtrack for the first level, I believe. And it has like so much momentum and energy to it. You'll hear it somewhere in the background of this review, and it's just glorious. Now on to one possible negative for many, though I see it as potential. Thronefall is currently in early access. For many, those two words will make this a no-go. I can attest that from my experience as an EA title, I've run into very few technical issues, if any. Because of that, I don't think this will be the specific area that people who may be interested in the game, or perhaps even played it, will find issues. I think where the largest complaints will be brought up is content, or lack thereof. Thronefall is a game that simplifies mechanics while offering a fair amount of depth. But how much depth is there? I would say if you go into this game with the intent of just beating it and piecing out, you could do so in about 5 hours. Currently, there are 4 main levels, not including a very brief tutorial map. But this is a small indie game, both in manpower and in scale. If you're looking for a game that completely maximizes your dollar to hour ratio, this might not be it. I mean, for its typically $7 price tag, I'm sure you could find older but exponentially more dense experiences to toss your time into. My retort to this is that everything? Is that ultimately how a game's value should be measured? As the game stands, there's enough content here to last nearly a dozen hours, at least for me. And remember, this game is in early access, which means it is very likely that more levels, weapons, perks, and debuffs will be added to the game. In fact, as recently as December of last year, an endless horde mode called Eternal Trials was added to the game, which randomizes enemy types and numbers to push the player to the edge. Thronefall offers much of the thrill of some of our favorite RTS and city builder games, with an infusion of roguelike and tower defense elements that will make it feel like something completely fresh. For me, this game ranks with some of the best money I've spent on Steam in recent memory, and I can't wait to see how this game grows and evolves.